Joining us now on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline is the voice of the Fresno State Bulldogs, Paul Loeffler. Paul, welcome to BYU Sports Nation.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I follow you all year long. It's nice when you're out on the road doing games different places and pick you guys up on satellite radio or on the tube, and you guys do a real good job, so it's a pleasure to be with you.
I appreciate you saying that, and for that, we will invite you again on the show at a future date.
No, I really meant it. It's the truth. You got, and it's nice because you get start to finish and real thorough coverage. And I feel like I know the Cougars from the season they've had and the schedule they've played and your guys' coverage. So I think I'm a little better prepared for this matchup Saturday than I might otherwise be.
Well, you're welcome, Paul. And on that note, what is your earliest memory of BYU football?
Ooh, wow, that's a good one. I'd probably go back. I'm a little young for the Gifford Nielsen days, but Steve Young I definitely remember, and McMahon. And, Coach DeRuiter for Fresno State was just talking the other day that he played as an Air Force sophomore in the first game where it was Lavelle Edwards Stadium, and Steve Young and the Cougars scored late to take a touchdown lead, but Air Force drove 99 yards, went for two in the win, and got it.
Oh.
So that's his Lavelle Edwards Stadium christening moment.
How is this BYU team viewed by Fresno State? How are they looking at this game?
I think Coach Streeter has a lot of respect for the Cougars, certainly for Bronco Mendenhall, and my discussions with him have centered around the talent that the Cougars have. I think he realizes this is every bit as big a challenge on Senior Day at Lavelle Edwards Stadium as he faced taking this team to SEC country and battling the Ole Miss Rebels. I think he takes this matchup very seriously. He mentioned Kafusi on the defensive line. I've watched your guys' season, and Kai Nakua is a great playmaker in the secondary. I think he knows some of the personnel. He's impressed with Tanner Mangum at quarterback and the way he stepped right into that opener for Taysom. I think he has a lot of respect for what BYU does, how physical the Cougars can play, and how much his Bulldogs need to be at their very best if they want to have a chance to steal a win on the road.
Let's talk about the Fresno State Bulldogs now, as we are joined with Paul Loeffler, voice of the Fresno State Bulldogs. Paul, obviously there have been issues for Fresno State on the field. They are coming off probably their best performance of the season that included 6 touchdown passes, which ties an FBS high this season. But what has been the biggest issue for the Bulldogs this year on the field?
Ooh, there have been a lot of them. Biggest, I guess, if you could boil it down, would probably be consistency. I mean, this team has been consistently inconsistent, and it's not just execution, it's personnel. I mean, they've gone through 4 quarterbacks, and they're back where they started now with Zach Greenlee, and I'm sure there's some shoulda, coulda, wouldas. If Greenlee had been the guy from the get-go, had been able to stay in the lineup, maybe things would be a little different. And then you say, well, he played his best game against the worst team in the conference, so how much can you really read into that? And he played his worst game against the best team in the conference in San Diego State. So there's got to be some middle ground somewhere. And who is the real Zach Greenlee? What's he really capable of? And if this team can find some kind of rhythm or consistency, could you see a quantum leap forward? It would be a quantum leap for this team to come in and go toe-to-toe with BYU, because really the Bulldogs haven't played close to anybody this year other than their 3 victories. It's been a struggle on both sides of the ball, and those have compounded each other. The offense's inability to get first downs and sustain drives has left the defense on the field for interminable stretches that, you've had games where it's 43, 44 minutes of possession for the other team. It's really hard to win a game like that.
Paul, you referenced Fresno State using 4 QBs and inconsistency for the team perspective, but from the quarterback position specifically, why has that position not been able to get going?
Well, injuries are part of it. To start the year, I think there's a little indecision. They had Greenlee returning. They didn't have anyone with a ton of experience, but he had more than the other guys. So they make him the opening day starter, but say going in, the true freshman, Chasen Virgil, is going to play. So that was the scenario the first 2 games, and that's how it unfolded. And they felt that Virgil played better at Ole Miss and deserved a chance to start against Utah. So they host the Utes, big opportunity game at Bulldog Stadium. Virgil starts, true freshman from Texas who had gotten here early and played in the spring. And he plays decent, but they're behind big. He gets injured at the start of the fourth quarter. They bring in Greenlee. He rallies the team, throws 3 touchdown passes, and you're saying, okay, well, maybe he's going to start next week. And he would have, except a few hours after that game, he got himself arrested for underage drinking. So then there's that scenario. He's suspended for a game. They start Ford Childress, who had been at West Virginia, was at a JC last year, and was making his Bulldog debut. He goes start to finish at San Jose State and plays decent, but they got pounded. They get home from the bus. He can't get off the bus. They realize he has internal injuries that required surgery, and he's done for the year. So 2 of the top 3 quarterbacks were out after the conference opener. They come back to Greenlee for San Diego State. The offense went 0 for 12 on third down in that game. So then you have questions about Greenlee. You end up turning to a redshirt freshman, Kilton Anderson. He had some moments, led him to a come-from-behind win over UNLV, but ultimately they turn back to Greenlee for this Hawaii game. He plays his best game ever, and now he'll start against the Cougars.
Well, you could put together a serious book and drama about the season that Fresno State has gone through. I imagine your play-by-play boards are like cramming for a test every week.
Yeah, they've been a little cluttered this year, and you know you look at you guys in contrast, and at the Cougars, and I thought Taysom Hill. I vote for the Heisman every year, and I've had him on my radar for a while. I thought he was going to be one of the top 3 candidates this year for the Heisman. It was so heartbreaking to see him go down in that opener, but to have Mangan step in right there, and Tanner's done an incredible job this season. I think the way it worked out for BYU is probably better than Fresno State, to know from the opener that here's your guy the rest of the way, as opposed to the carousel and the roller coaster ride that the Bulldogs have been on.
The voice of the Fresno State Bulldogs, Paul Loeffler, with us on BYU Sports Nation, making his show debut. Who is the best player right now on Fresno State's team?
I'd have to go with Adro Ederaine, although, yeah, I'll tell you, I think the team MVP is the punter, Garrett Swanson. He has been as consistent as anybody. He's done a tremendous job game in, game out. Rarely are his punts returned. He's done a phenomenal job from start to finish. But Adro Ederaine on the defensive side of the ball, a 3-year starter, a guy who played hurt last year, had 2 shoulders that required surgery after the season, but he fought through that, and he's become a better player because of it. He's always a threat to be in the backfield, disrupting things. Picked off his 2nd pass of the year last year. He's on pace to set the career Mountain West record for tackles for loss, and he's one of only 7 players in school history with 20 sacks. He's got great speed off the edge. He's the vocal leader of the defense. And, you know, if there's one guy who's been a game changer, if you could say that on this team this year, it's probably number 31 on defense, Adro Ederaine.
Paul, you referenced sacks, and that's one thing that this Bulldog defense has been very good at. 27 sacks this season, 22nd in the country. How do you believe that this Bulldog defense stacks up against BYU's offense, specifically the offensive line?
You know, that'll tell a big part of the story, and that's been the disappointing thing, I think, for Fresno State this year, is that the Bulldogs have been dominated at the line of scrimmage by schools that they used to do that to, schools like San Jose State, schools like Utah State. And, you know, playing that 3-4 front, if you don't have that real size at nose guard or in that defensive line, sometimes you get shoved around a little bit, and we've seen that. Even Air Force, with an undersized line, shoved the Dogs around at the line of scrimmage. So I think I'd have to give the edge to the Cougars. And what really scares me from a Fresno State perspective about the BYU offense is those outside receivers. I mean, I've watched the plays all year that Mitch Matthews has made, and then you have Kurtz and Houck out there, and all of those guys are giants compared to anybody in the Fresno State secondary. And, you know, I think that's a challenge. If I'm Fresno State, I'm challenging those DBs to make a play and find a way, because on paper it looks like a mismatch, and sometimes if you know that's the strategy, you can find a way to turn that upside down and take advantage. And to me, that's one of the only hopes for Fresno State in this game, is to force some turnovers and probably to get some takeaways in the passing game.
Paul, with that Heisman vote, who gets your number 1 nod today?
You know, I'm actually, part of the thing that we sign as voters is not to disclose that. So I know some people do, but they're breaking the rules, so I'm not supposed to say that. But, you know, I've been following it, and my philosophy on it, everybody's different. My thing is to take the whole season at the end of the year and to keep tabs on it, but not get too worked up in the rankings week to week, because at the end of the year, that may give you a little bias toward who really deserves it. So I try to wait till every single game, even Army and Navy, and maybe Keenan Reynolds is in that discussion.
Oh, okay.
But, you know, wait for every single game and then make that determination. But, I have no qualms saying that Taysom Hill would have been right up there with the season I think he was ready for. And the start he was off to in that game, man, I was watching him saying, yeah, this is the guy I thought he was. And it sure sounds like he's been a big part of what the Cougars have done this year anyway. But it's so tough to see a young man so talented and so well put together and so poised for a super season have it evaporate in that opener.
Now, let me ask you this in closing. Who's the guy that deserves more Heisman credit that isn't getting it? Is it Keenan Reynolds of Navy?
Yeah, that's probably a good one because who means more to his team? I mean, if you look at them, they're probably, if they don't slip up down the stretch, they're going to be in one of the Access Bowls, and the one loss they had was the game where he got hurt. I mean, if you're talking about value to a team and a difference maker on the field, you take Henry away from Alabama, I think the Crimson Tide probably still has the same record. Fournette, you take him away from LSU, and I don't know. I mean, that might be a bigger chasm there.
Yeah.
But no, I think Keenan Reynolds is a guy who means as much to his team as anybody. And, you're not supposed to consider other factors, but when you think about what he's prepared to do to our country, I can't help but give you a little more respect for the guy, too.
Paul, great to have you on the show, man. We'll see you on Saturday afternoon.
Get some sun out for us, boys.
You got it. We'll work on that. Paul Loeffler on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline. Deseret First, your values, your timeline, your financial future. 46 degrees and sunny, by the way, the current forecast for Saturday's game against Fresno State.
We need to have him write reviews for the show. He was fantastic.
Like I said, we'll bring him back on the show anytime.
Big fan of BYU Sports Nation, helping him prepare. Look at that.